What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 3 NFL Power Rankings show. I always love this week because it's the only week on the season where the amount of information we have on these teams literally doubles. I think it's a very big week as far as us starting to understand what these teams are all about and what the story of this 2025 NFL season is going to be all about. So very much looking forward to today's video. If you could do me a quick favor as we get started and just hit that like button down below. Of course, if you enjoy my analysis, make sure you subscribe as well. Just a quick announcement here. As many of you guys know, I have a podcast. It's called the Fully Inflated Football Show. I've made the decision to bring the video version of that podcast back here to the main channel. So I will no longer be at least for the time being, uploading on that individual YouTube channel for the podcast. And then, of course, if you guys want the audio version of the show, you can follow the Fully Inflated Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm working on figuring out how to, at least with Spotify, how to get the video into that feed as well. It's on my short list of things to do here. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the Week 3 NFL Power Rankings, starting with our very bottom tier, the same title as last week, Booty Until Proven Otherwise, but this is a different group of teams this week. So at number 32, I have the New Orleans Saints. I will give them credit. They are at least more competitive out the gate here than I expected. Spencer Rattler doesn't look horrible. And the defense isn't just rolling over and getting blown out the gate here. I'm not going to say I'm impressed by Brandon Staley in this defense, but they've at least had the ball with a chance to win at the end of these games. I don't know if and when they will climb out of the number 32 spot. At no point have I watched this team this season and said, and really felt at least like they were going to win, but at least they're keeping it competitive in this rebuild. But then at number 31, the team really pushing maybe for that number 32 spot if they can't straighten things out quickly. And that is the Saints' divisional opponent here, the Carolina Panthers. Certainly has not been the fun start to the season you would have hoped for. Bryce Young does just look kind of lost out there for the majority of his snaps, at least early in games. And he's got to stop turning the football over. And we know this defense doesn't really have the horses. So the Panthers are struggling right now. Hopefully a better second half against Arizona can light a fire under this team's ass. And then at number 30, the Tennessee Titans maintaining this spot. I mean, this is where I had them coming into the year, and it just kind of hasn't been a surprising start for Tennessee. I think Cam Ward, he's at least, staying above water right now in this rookie season. But for me, it's more the same with Brian Callahan. It's like, can we figure out what the Titans do well here? And the clock is really starting to tick because they're 0-2, and I still just don't have a lot of faith in him as a coach or really what the identity of this football team is and is going to be moving forward. And then I am going to drop the Cleveland Browns into our final tier in this booty tier, if you will. The sad thing here is this defense, to me, looks at least much closer to that 2023 elite defense that the Browns did have. I think they're fantastic on the side of the ball, on that side of the ball. But it is a great example of just how much offense matters. And the Browns might have the worst offense in the league. It's certainly in that conversation. I just don't really know how much longer you can keep going with the Joe Flacco thing. I continue to kind of raise questions if Kevin Stefanski is this offensive guru that we certainly applauded him for years ago. And like we saw this week, as great as defense as you might play, the dam is going to break eventually. And that's what happened in the fourth quarter against the Ravens. They just could not hold up. It's not going to be for 41 points every week because you're not playing Lamar and the Ravens every week, but you can still get a similar script there. So I've got the Browns in the bottom tier there at number 29. And for those looking at the graphic there, you can see those little arrows in the top right corner. Just a fun addition to keep an eye out for here to indicate a either climb or a drop in these tiers from last week's rankings. But let's go to my next tier here. This will be tier 6. And this week, I am categorizing this as not good teams. Maybe not horrible teams, though. And we're going to start that with the Miami Dolphins at number 28, climbing out of the very bottom tier after the week 1 disaster. They stopped the bleeding a little bit this week as far as this team feeling at least more like a competent football team. Certainly offensively, they got Devon Achane going. Tyreek Hill did some stuff this week. So they're at least competitive in football games here. I don't really view them in the same category as those bottom four teams, a much more established track record of offensive competency with those playmakers. And, Mike McDaniel certainly isn't at the top of your coaching rankings like he would have been a couple of years ago, but I still trust him to more or less put out a competent offense, and we saw that this week against New England. But then at number 27, the New York Jets, really any gas they might have had coming out of week one with the run game and Justin Fields having maybe turned a corner. Well, the tank is empty on the hype machine right now. We'll see if they can get that back on track. But yeah, they were just out of the Bills' league in this game. And I thought Tony Romo did a good job on this broadcast, highlighting how predictable Aaron Glenn's defense is pre-snap. That's not really the world most of these modern defenses are living in, right? With the pre-snap disguise and the post-snap rotations and stuff. Well, Aaron Glenn's going to kind of tell you what he's going to run and then try to beat you at it. You go against an experienced quarterback like Josh Allen, he's just going to take what you're giving him every single time. And the Jets defense just didn't really have much of a chance here. So I'm not writing off Aaron Glenn or anything, but it was a question I had about him coming out of Detroit. And, a lot of coordinators take some time to get things going in a new spot. So I'm not writing him off yet, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on with this defense certainly struggling in the first couple of weeks here with the Jets. But then our third straight AFC East team, congratulations, Buffalo Bills. You are the AFC East champions. But at number 26, the New England Patriots, who scrape by against Miami. But a big deal here in that Drake May, I would say, played the most complete start of his career. Great to see that here early in year two. I think he had 4 incompletions, 2 touchdowns, maybe most importantly, no turnover-worthy plays. Last week, I asked for consistency from Drake May. Just give me 4 quarters of consistency. That's exactly what we got. So that's super promising. This team obviously has holes and things that they're trying to figure out. But as long as he can continue to play something close to that, they are going to be heading in the right direction with the Patriots. And then the New York Giants climbing out of the bottom tier. Viewers of this channel know I have really gone to my grave defending Brian Daboll, saying he can figure this thing out. Last week, coming off the heels of that Commanders game, I was finally saying, I think I'm ready to move on from defending Brian Daboll. And then he goes and totally redeems himself with this Giants offense putting up, 38 points in Dallas? Did I get that right? How about Russell Wilson bringing back the deep accuracy, the moon ball, and how good is Malik Neighbors? Man, jeez, he is legit. Cam Scatterbo should be getting double the touches he's getting every time he touches the football. He's breaking a tackle. He looks awesome. So they have life offensively. You love to see that. Even Wan'Dale Robinson providing some explosiveness to this offense. Hopefully we can get Andrew Thomas back here soon. Starting to like much more of what we're seeing on that side of the ball. What I didn't expect was to be so disappointed in this defense. Not that I thought super highly of Shane Bowen, but he seems like a problem right now. I mean, you have that defensive line and you're giving up 41 points without really anything to write home about as far as scheming or blitz designs or just establishing an identity on your defensive side of the ball for what you do well. I got to think that Shane Bowen has become public enemy number 1 for Giants fans. I mean, you should expect better defensive play, certainly than what they've gotten with that defensive line. And it just hasn't been there. So it's certainly not all perfect, and they didn't even win this week, but man, was that a fun game to watch for the Giants, moving up 4 spots and climbing out of that bottom tier. But then the Chicago Bears. I mean, Bears fans, I'm genuinely sorry. The more things change, the more things stay the same. We're right back here with the Bears, a horrible start, 0-2 start, an opportunity in the Ben Johnson revenge game for them to get things back on track, and obviously it goes in the wrong direction. Things did get worse for the Bears. I will say, this week wasn't so much a Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson panic button. This was more about the front office not equipping this team in the right way. I mean, DeAndre Swift, as your starting running back, should have been avoided. He's out there fumbling in a big spot, kind of really swung this game. And the defense just doesn't have the firepower to go up against an offense like Detroit. I question this draft loading up on just extra playmakers that frankly this roster didn't need, and they're showing that they didn't need them. Like, they're not using Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. I don't know why they drafted a backup tackle in the second round. They took a developmental like flex interior player in the second round. They needed pass rush help, they needed secondary depth, and the defense was almost entirely neglected outside of like Dio Odeyingbo. I think was a pretty solid signing. So if we're like pointing the fingers at public enemies number one for NFL teams, as we did with the Giants and their defensive coordinator, Ryan Poles, I wouldn't, if I'm a Bears fan, I do not want to head into another offseason with him in control. It's just been bad from him, frankly. Now, I do think a fair counter argument to that is Ben Johnson most likely came in and voiced that these were the types of players he wanted and really pushed for that. But I think a strong general manager will push back and say, no, we have a left tackle in Braxton Jones. He's really good. Just give it a second. You'll see that. We don't need Luther Burden. We have Luther Burden at home in DJ Moore. What you don't want is to have to score 58 points to win against your former team. Let's go get some defense. So, anyway, the Bears are in a very tough spot, and with, Jalen Johnson going down for the season as well, like, I don't see a whole lot of light at the end of the tunnel here unless Caleb and Ben Johnson just really start roaring offensively, but there's not a ton of signs that that's coming either. But that does conclude our sixth tier there. Before we go to our next group, I want to thank Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's Power Rankings. You guys, Underdog Pick'em contests are the best way to take a sport you already love in watching football on Sundays, Thursdays, Fridays, Mondays, you name it, nowadays. But Underdog is the best way to take a sport that you love and get even more enjoyment out of it. You can make small level entries with chances to win big cash prizes. All you have to do is select higher or lower on player stat lines. Receiving yards, touchdowns, sacks, tackles, if you're into defense, hit on your picks, and boom, not only were you more invested in any given football game, but you win some cash prizes as well. And if you sign up right now using code TFG, you'll get a bonus match and you'll support my channel in the process. Good luck, everybody. Play responsibly. And thank you again to Underdog for sponsoring today's video. But let's go to our next tier here. We're sticking roughly with the same title. Last week, this was the soul-searching tier, but I'm adding mid/soul-searching team. I think you get the point with this group. Just very much our teams that we're still learning about, and they certainly are figuring themselves out as we go here. But this is going to start with the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 23. Pretty tough loss to stomach. They were in a good position to win that game against the Bengals. Couldn't convert from a 3rd and 2 to really help put that game away late. And then they give up a 90-yard touchdown drive to Jake Browning to fall to 1-1. I'm still interested in the Jags. I think they've shown some grit and toughness despite the close game loss and all that, but they're running the ball much better. I think their defensive line's playing well. They've got to figure out really how to get this Travis Hunter thing to work. It's been kind of a bust through 2 weeks, to be honest, but plenty of time still to right the ship on that. But you gave up 3 first-round picks to make him the Shohei Ohtani of football, and it certainly has not been that experience so far. I think Trevor Lawrence played better this week, but I don't think the Jags are a bad team right now. They're certainly showing to be a tough out. They do have potential. We'll see if they can start to kind of really string things together and make this season interesting, or if it really is going to be one of those kind of sub 500 transition seasons that was probably expected for this team anyway. But then we have the Las Vegas Raiders at number 22, dropping down 4 spots here. It's more about other teams really impressing this week. Honestly, I think the Raiders are going to be just fine. I really felt like Brock Bowers was limited in that game, kind of getting thrown out there as a decoy. You weren't going to be able to game plan with him throughout the week. And they just kept stalling on these drives. Not to excuse it, like, this team is obviously far from perfect, and Geno has just got to play better. He was so much better in week 1 than week 2. So kind of caught in the middle there. A good week 1, a pretty hard to watch week 2, but at the same time, their defense showed against a Chargers offense that obviously gave the Chiefs a ton of problems, and I think pretty highly of what the Chargers are doing right now. it's not like they got just trounced in that game either. So they do get a -4 here, but I think 22 is a good spot for the Raiders right now. Then at number 21, the Minnesota Vikings, our biggest faller in this episode, not just dropping down 8 spots, but falling 2 tiers in these power rankings. Now, I really like to account for injuries in these power rankings. I think it's a huge part of the sport, and the Vikings are going through it right now. Not just J.J. McCarthy. I mean, we'll find out this week if that's even a downgrade. That's a whole nother conversation in its own right? Like, J.J. McCarthy has not been the prince that was promised so far. He does not look good. But it's honestly maybe even more so about Blake Cashman's out. Andrew Van Ginkel was out. The offensive line is banged up. Harrison Smith hasn't been out there. Jordan Addison suspended another week. I do think the Vikings will climb back up, at least to an extent, this season. I really still trust this coaching staff. I trust this roster when they can get some of those guys back healthy, which that is on the horizon. But you do have to address the elephant in the room. Like, do the Vikings have bottom 3 quarterback play in the league right now? It's fair to at least raise that question, and it's just hard to win football games, as we saw Sunday night, when you don't really have a quarterback that's comfortable with the offense or knows what he's doing out there, whether that's J.J. McCarthy or potentially Carson Wentz. We'll see what he looks like after, just spending a few weeks with this team. He's certainly being thrown into action sooner than you would have hoped for him. So Vikes are in a tough spot. I think they can bounce back and salvage a competitive season here. But I think there's probably a lot of vets in that locker room looking around like, man, this is not what we expected with all the talent in this room. But then at number 20, I do have the Cincinnati Bengals also dropping down 5 spots. Like I said, injuries are a big deal, and you lose an elite quarterback. I don't care if you climb to 2-0 or not. Like, I don't think as highly of the Bengals heading into week 3 as I did heading into week 2. Because you don't have Joe Burrow, presumably for the next 3 months of football. That just absolutely sucks for Bengals fans, and I don't think a lot of Bengals fans are really going to argue with them falling in the rankings despite the win this week. Now, just to paint a little bit of hope on the Bengals, like, we've seen Jake Browning kind of keep this team's season alive, if you will, when he stepped in 2023, right? Thought he was relatively impressive then, and he did everything he needed to help the Bengals win this game against the Jags. Like, I think he's a very competent backup. He's aggressive. He had a couple of interceptions in this game against the Jags, and he's just going to be kind of a week-to-week option, as a lot of backups are. But how big of a deal is it for the Bengals that they did start 2-0? Because if you can just play 500 or even sub-500 football over the next 3 months, that's presumably 11 or 12 games with the bye week in there. If they can just go 5-6 or 6-6 or even 5-7, you're still looking at the hope of Joe Burrow coming back with a team with maybe a 7-7 or 8-6 record, and a chance to get to double-digit wins and sneak in as a wild card team. Hell, even a 9-win season can get you a wild card spot. So I don't think the season is done. It's just like every time you can squeeze out a win in the next 3 months, it's going to be a big deal for the Bengals just to start racking those up in an effort to get Joe Burrow back at the end of the season. And if that happens, it could be good for the Bengals to really grow as a football team and discover what they do well other than Joe Burrow. But I think in the meantime, like, this team's not going to just get blown out every week, I don't think, with Jake Browning getting to throw to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They showed this week they can still move the football. So we'll see where this one goes. They instantly become one of the more interesting narratives on the season, even if their individual football games might not be quite as fun to watch anymore. But then I have the Dallas Cowboys at number 19, climbing up a spot. This, to me, it's just a very solid football team. I don't trust this defense one bit, but, dude, Dak Prescott deserves his praise. Just an outstanding performance against that Giants defense. I know we were hard on Shane Bowen as a defensive coordinator, I think rightfully so, but Dak did have to make a lot of tough throws under pressure. He just kept battling in that game, despite the fact that his defense couldn't get a stop until overtime, really. I've totally come around on the fact that like Dak Prescott deserves his credit. 3 years ago when people were calling him the MVP of the league and ranking him top as a top 5 quarterback, I couldn't quite get there. But I think people have mostly just forgotten about Dak Prescott. And it's like, no, he's still absolutely a top 10 quarterback, and he's playing at a super high level right now. He looks awesome. So anytime you got an offense playing like this, they're not going to be an easy out, even if they are a beatable football team, and they still hardly beat the New York Giants. How about Brandon Aubrey, by the way? What a weapon. My God. But then I have the Arizona Cardinals at 18, just kind of hanging out around this spot. Not going to get too much credit for beating the Carolina Panthers. Really just benefiting from teams like the Bengals and the Vikings falling here as the Cardinals climb up a spot. But, they can run the ball. I think this defense is showing that they're frisky. Not that they had to this week against the Panthers, but I still want to see Kyler and Marv click, and this team show that they can really win games in a different script, right? Like, we know they can kind of win these close games with a good schemed up kind of run game, play action style approach, play conservative, bend don't break defense. But do they have a next gear before I kind of climb them in these rankings? I love that they've started 2-0, but I'm still itching to see more in terms of upside from this Cardinals team. And with that, we will jump to my next tier, and this is the playoff fringe tier. And teams that really just, to me, have some questions that need answered one way or another before I can really view them as a playoff caliber team through and through. But relatively speaking, I do still think these teams are in a pretty good spot. And that does start with the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 17. And I think this just comes from my trust that Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin are going to get this defense right. They have the pass rush. Jalen Ramsey looks awesome. Even if there isn't evidence of good defense in the first 2 weeks of this season, we have, 2 decades of evidence that Mike Tomlin's going to get this defense figured out. So at this point in time, I do still trust that things will straighten out there. And it's just so reminiscent of the Jets team last year, right? Where you looked at the Aaron Rodgers offense and said, if the defense just lived up to their billing and you're not asking Aaron Rodgers to score 30 points every week, you're going to feel a lot better about what they have going on that side of the ball. And I don't think the Steelers offense is like underwhelming or not meeting expectations or anything. We knew the Seahawks defense is really good. And yeah, they gave Rodgers and this offense some trouble. I figured that was going to happen. In fact, that's kind of why I picked the Seahawks to win this game on my Patreon picks. But I'm just not panicking about the Steelers at this point in time. And I don't think this loss against the Seahawks warrants a panic either. Like, Caleb Johnson has to either figure out how to return kicks or get out. That's back-to-back weeks with critical mistakes. Gifts the Seahawks a free touchdown in this game that never should have happened. And by the way, Rodgers threw a total dime rolling to his left that should have been a touchdown to Pat Freiermuth. And just bad luck, Calvin Austin reaches his hand out there thinking he might have been the target on the play. The ball gets tipped up and intercepted. Huge, a couple of just massive swings in this game that were, mistakes by players on the Steelers, but not predictable mistakes. If those two things don't happen, the Steelers very well might have won this game. So certainly not in panic mode with Pittsburgh as they fall to 1-1. Though they do drop a spot here in the rankings, getting passed up by the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a big week for the Seahawks. They climb up 6 spots here. They jump up a tier. 2 main things here. We've now seen a continuation of the Mike McDonald defense really causing problems for opposing offenses. And maybe the biggest thing here is like Sam Darnold, I think, just looks stable. He's not like having this horrible regression back to previous Sam Darnold. He's running the offense. He's surviving behind a questionable offensive line. That was my biggest question on Seattle coming into the year, is just what kind of version of Sam Darnold do we get? And I think it's at least a stabilizing force there at quarterback. I'm not going to say I'm impressed by him or this offense or anything like that, but I'm not necessarily worried about it to the extent that I was coming into the year. So that's just kind of a deep sigh of relief, at least at this point in time for the Seahawks. So definitely helps them climb in the ranks here. They should be a very competitive force in the NFC, even if they do sit today in fourth place in the NFC West. I think it was an impressive big win to go on the road and get this one in Pittsburgh. And I know Cardinals fans are saying, what the hell? How did they pass us? We're 2-0. They're 1-1. We're division rivals. Well, look, Cardinals fans, you know I like you. I had you above the Seahawks coming into the year. But a close loss against the Niners and going on the road and beating Pittsburgh is a lot more impressive than kind of scraping by against the Saints and Panthers, our bottom two teams in these power rankings. But let's go to my number 15 team here, our biggest riser this week, the Atlanta Falcons. And I'll give it to you fans of both these teams. I think the two fan bases that were ticked off the most by my power rankings from the preseason were the Seahawks fans and Falcons fans, saying I was too low on these teams. And at least as we sit here in week 3, you're looking like you're right. And in the case of the Atlanta Falcons, the defense is coming together. I have thrown a lot of shade at Raheem Morris, questioning as a coach with a defensive background if he was going to be able to get this defense right. I really questioned if moving on from Jimmy Lake to getting Jeff Ulbrich, who struggled to get the Jets defense under control last year, if that was going to make a difference for this defense. And out the gate, I mean, the coordination of this defense has been so much better, but also the players up front with their front, but also the players and the injection of talent to this defense has made a huge difference. And it wasn't just this week against the Vikings where they were dominant defensively, but you rewind last week, and I think what they did against the Bucs as well, outside of a couple of big plays made by Emeka Egbuka, they played really well last week. So you got those 2 first-rounders up front, I think, playing well. They're getting something from Brandon Dorless. I love to see that. Year 2 for him. And then some of these, rookies on the back end. Xavier Watts just was always a steal, but it's just great to see that play out in real time. He's been a huge impact in the first 2 weeks here. And I love the foresight to take Billy Bowman, who was more of a deep safety at Oklahoma, and make him a slot corner. He's played really well. Granted, he almost gave up a huge touchdown to Naylor there if J.J. McCarthy could have just hit him. But starting to see the vision for this Falcons defense. Absolutely. So that's a big deal. I mean, offensively, they are still figuring a lot out. I don't think Michael Penix looks bad. I don't think he looks great. He just is a young quarterback. But they do have Bijan, who might be the best running back in the NFL this year. He just looks insane. Like he is ready to reach and hit his prime. Just everything he does is just so spectacular. Whether it's the shiftiness or having the power to do it at that size, what he does in the receiving game is just unbelievable. But Pitts looks pretty good this year. Drake London, obviously not fully healthy right now, but I think the Falcons are impressing me and looking like a threat to at least be a wild card, if not keep pace with the Bucs and maybe set up for a big matchup further down the season to get in the mix in the NFC South. But they definitely deserve their credit. And then how about the Indianapolis Colts? Field goal luck or not, I think that was an impressive outing against the Denver Broncos, a team that I do have a lot of respect for. In a week where you're out your 2 outside corners and your best edge rusher in Laiatu Latu, for the Colts to win that game is impressive. And even for them to just, had they lost on that field goal at the end of the game, if they didn't get the leverage penalty, that was obviously, it was leverage, but they don't always call it. I wish the refs were just more consistent in calling that penalty. It was a problem last year as well. So that needs to be called out here. Like they caught a break there, but that doesn't mean they weren't impressive. Like the Daniel Jones thing is working. Tyler Warren looks like a certified steal in the middle of the first round. I think he, to me, is the early front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And I love the way Shane Steichen is getting creative to, find ways to get him the football. Jonathan Taylor looks healthy and is explosive as ever. Josh Downs woke up this week. Alec Pierce as the vertical threat, and Daniel Jones showing that he's willing to push it down the field and get it out there to a guy like Alec Pierce. I mean, they got everything working here. I'm proud to say that I defended the Colts and said, look, this has been a 500 football team with Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. There's no reason they can't be something like that with Daniel Jones. And I'm proud to say that I defended the Colts for going with Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson because clearly they have a vision for this offense, and clearly Daniel Jones can run it very well. So they've been justified in that decision. They're 2-0 and absolutely setting up to be a playoff contending football team this season. But then, kind of on a negative light, a team dropping down into this tier, the Houston Texans. And they were my kind of like surprise pick to win the Super Bowl. Like, if I had to make a fun pick out of the AFC that I'm not necessarily predicting to go there, but maybe they can reach those heights, that the Houston Texans were that team for me. And unfortunately, the offense just can't really hold up their end of the bargain right now. The defense looks as good as advertised, and we've seen now back-to-back weeks they're going to be right in these games because of that defense, but they weren't able to slam the door shut, as you would hope a true championship caliber defense would have been able to do against a Bucs offense with 2 backup tackles in there. So that was disappointing. But offensively, man, like, this offensive line is clearly not fixed. Their slap job effort to just bring in a bunch of like journeyman vets and day 2 draft picks and try to throw this thing together with super glue, like, it has been a train wreck so far through 2 weeks. CJ Stroud is doing what he can, but he's clearly uncomfortable as still a young quarterback. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have moved on from Bobby Slowick. Like, it was ugly last year, but at least Slowick looked awesome in his first year here in Houston. And it's not like they really shook things up, right? They just stuck inside the same system. They went with another Shanny McVay guy. And I think the play calling it certainly isn't better. It might be worse. Some of these short yardage play calls, the inability to convert down in the red zone, the 2-point try that ended up being critical in this game late. It's hard to put a lot of faith in these Texans right now, man. It really is. And boy, are the Colts licking their chops. They got a 2-game lead now in the AFC South. I'm still putting the Texans above them ever so slightly here, but it's going to be a fun race to see this play out. Clearly, the Colts have their act together more than the Texans do right now. But that is going to conclude our playoff fringe tier. Let's go to tier 3 for me. These are true playoff caliber teams. And I'm going to hold on to the Denver Broncos in this tier, at least for now. Obviously, they go on the road. They lose a heartbreaker in Indianapolis. I mentioned the field goal debacle earlier. Really could have gone either way for Denver. They could have walked out of there with a win or a loss. I think in games like that, you just resort to the film and watching the team and asking, do you feel better or worse about the team coming out of that game? And I certainly don't feel worse about Denver. They didn't have their best day defensively, but when I broke this game down, I did talk about how, like, the way the Colts play offense, distributing the ball, a lot of good blitz answers from that Colts receiving core, and Daniel Jones, has his flaws, but as a veteran that can get the ball out quick against the blitz, it's a style of offense that can have success against Vance Joseph's defense. So going in, I knew it wasn't going to be easy for that defense. Offensively, though, look, Bo Nix settled back down and had a way better game this week. Had some big throws down the field. They were moving the ball just fine. I mean, him and Troy Franklin are really developing. I can't even say developing, but rediscovering maybe that chemistry they had in college. He's definitely someone, if you're making fantasy waiver wire claims this week, I don't think that's going to go away. They really started to get him involved in the passing game here. But at the end of the day, I trust the Broncos defense to come back to planet Earth here after everything we've seen from them really over the last year plus. And I'm not going to overreact to a tough road loss like that easily they could have walked out of that 2-0. But then at number 11, I have the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, look, they're going through it offensively, injuries galore. But Mac Jones played well. I think you get a little bit of breath of fresh air. There's been some mounting questions about Kyle Shanahan, just how elite of a coach is he. I think it was a nice reminder to see that, yeah, this is still the coach that can take pretty much any quarterback and have them play at a pretty high level. I'm not even saying that to take away from Brock Purdy. I've talked about this. I think Purdy does a lot of play extension stuff that raises the ceiling of this offense, but this is more of a Kyle Shanahan discussion. Like, really fun to see Mac Jones come out, have control of this offense in his first opportunity to play with this Niners team. And you can see why Kyle Shanahan wanted him coming out of the draft. Like, the anticipation throws are there over the middle of the field and all that stuff. But right now, I think the biggest deal for the Niners is like the return of the defense, right? Robert Saleh comes back. Nick Bosa has been taking over games. Bryce Huff was a big addition. They're just so much more put together and trustworthy on this side of the ball. And surprise, surprise, you say goodbye to the coordinator that kind of let Mac Jones have whatever he wanted against you through the air. Go get Robert Saleh, and you're stable again there. So they're 2-0, and I think this team is still kind of just flying under the radar, and that's kind of scary for NFC teams. Like, this team is not nearly at full force. Brock Purdy will be back. I think there's a chance we're sleeping on the return of Brandon Ayuk. George Kittle is out right now. Like, the fact that this team is 2-0 probably should be getting a little bit more attention than it is right now. And obviously they're not there yet. We have them ranked 11th. Again, they're injured and they beat the Saints. Like, I think 11 is the right spot for them. But as we talk about this team in future weeks, they absolutely could start to make some scary noise here. We'll see if they can do it as we move forward, though. But then I have the Washington Commanders at number 10, dropping down 2 spots in the rankings, but also falling down out of that Super Bowl contenders tier. I think I did just overreact to a week 1 win against the Giants. This is a good football team, and it's certainly not worth panicking going on the road on a short week and losing in Lambeau when I think we're discovering that Green Bay, I mean, they're making a case that they could be the best team in the league this year, out the gate at least. We'll get to Green Bay. But this team does clearly have some issues right now. And if not issues, like maybe a lack of upside at this point in time, like until they can start to get better on either side of the ball. Like, I think they're very solid offensively, very solid defensively, but are they great on either side of the ball right now? I would say no. I don't think Jaden Daniels has been awesome this year. Obviously, playing that Green Bay pass rush was never going to be easy, but he had a really hard time finding any sort of answers until the game was effectively over. And then week 1, I don't think he played bad against the Giants, but he did miss a lot of throws on tape. So, he's got to get back to playing at the level he was last year. I think that's possible, but he also doesn't have, amazing talent around him to get him there. And right now, they're really having a hard time tapping into Terry McLaurin and his superstardom, too. So they're just not there right now offensively. Not saying they can't. But defensively, I definitely think, I like the way they're coached. I think Dan Quinn's got these guys flying around, and they're a high-floor defense, but do they have game-changing players on that side of the ball really at any level of the defense? No, they don't. So they're a good playoff-caliber team, but I do want to see them reach new heights if I'm going to put them back into that Super Bowl contenders tier, which I do unfortunately regret putting them in there so quickly from last week's rankings. Probably my biggest regret from last week. But then at number 9, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, really just gritty win against the Houston Texans. I did not think they were going to walk out of that game with a win, and they just found a way as a good football team like the Bucs do that are going through it right now, right? No Chris Godwin, no Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke gets hurt in this game, but Todd Bowles schemed things up defensively, got some good blitz stuff going. And Baker Mayfield, he's showing, if you need at times in the season to just get on his shoulders and let him carry you to victory, he is starting to show that he can do that. How impressive has Baker Mayfield been in this Tampa Bay regime? And this placement is kind of the reverse of the Bengals and Vikings down there in that they're just not healthy right now for me to say that they're currently, showing to be a Super Bowl contending team. They've had to kind of escape with victories against Atlanta and Houston that easily, this team could easily be 0-2. You change the outcome of a couple plays, and that's where they're at. But once they start to get some of these superstars back offensively, absolutely, they could climb up here. So the Bucs are impressively 2-0 right now and climbing up a spot this week in the power rankings. And by the way, they get Tyrod Taylor and the Jets this week at home. So they're very likely going to be 3-0. We said going in, like, they just got to find a way to basically go 2-2 until Tristan Wirfs and Godwin get back, and then they're going to be scary. Well, they might be 3-0 there. So the Bucs are in a very good spot. But let's now climb up to my second tier here, my Super Bowl contenders tier. And I do still have the Kansas City Chiefs at 0-2 here. Couple of tough losses against a pair of teams that I still have yet to rank here. So two good teams that they've had to play here. But they've got issues, man. They've got stuff to figure out. They're just not an explosive offense, as they really haven't been for some time now. And while they're so well coached and so experienced defensively, they're obviously excellent on that side of the ball, but they're not elite. They're not great enough to carry a Chiefs offense that, frankly, even though you have Patrick Mahomes, like, they're just a very mid offense. They just don't have juice. You wish they had more of a impactful run game. You wish they had these playmakers healthy, which presumably they're going to get these guys back. You know, Rashee Rice, especially off the suspension. Xavier Worthy hopefully can get back healthy, but they got to give their defense more help, man. That's really what it comes down to for me. I'm not panicking about the Chiefs. I'm not foolish enough to say that an 0-2 Chiefs team shouldn't still be viewed as a team that can still win the Super Bowl. But that is entirely attached to their resume and who their coach and quarterback is, not so much attached to what they've looked like on the football field today. So they're in kind of dangerous territory, and if they keep losing games, eventually we're going to have some real conversations about the Chiefs, but that's not going to happen for me here at week 2 with this team. Then I do have the Chargers at number 7. They're going to drop down a spot, and Chargers fans aren't going to like that. This is really just straight up about Detroit kind of reclaiming their potency this week. Not anything negative to say against the Chargers, other than Khalil Mack was sitting there in his street clothes in a sling. As of this recording, I haven't seen the update there, but I can't imagine that's very good. And God, I just don't like that defensive line, especially without Khalil Mack. But Jesse Minter just keeps getting it done, dude. This is such a well-coached defense, especially in terms of just like the fundamentals, communication, tackling, playing hard. There might not be a defense in the league that does the theoretically the easy stuff as well as the Chargers do. Like, it's one thing to preach those things. It's a whole nother thing to just come out and execute it as consistently as this team does. So I still like this defense. It's just, God, you don't look at that roster and fear it, but they do deserve some respect there. And offensively, I really like the way that they've come out swinging, and kind of feels like last year was all just building up to what they're doing this year. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but teams are going to respect the Chargers' commitment to wanting to run the football, just based on the whole mentality of Harbaugh coming in and everything they did last year. But I love that they're setting you up, coming out with, Scott Matlock out there. Like, you see him come out and you're like, oh yeah, it's the Chargers and Harbaugh. Like, they're going to run the football. Nope, they're loading up to launch the ball down the field, and Greg Roman is scheming dudes up out of play action, and Quentin Johnston is a threat down the field. He has found his hands, and it is a thing of beauty right now. And Herbert is absolutely playing at an MVP level. Back-to-back weeks now, using his feet to extend plays, pushing the ball downfield. I love everything we're seeing from Justin Herbert. So I know Chargers fans aren't going to like the -1. That is entirely about a different team and how I feel about them. But the Chargers did come out of this week now as betting favorites to win the AFC West, and I don't think that's crazy at all. But we're going to stay in LA for my number 6 team, the LA Rams. I don't really have too much new to add on what we said about the Rams last week. Fortunately, they play the Eagles this week in what should be a potential game of the week candidate there. But I do love the way that they have really just hit the ground running with this perfect balance of Puka and Adams and Stafford. Like, everything just feels right offensively to me, even if things aren't always perfect. I think they have so many problem solvers on this offense. Excited to see that against a Vic Fangio defense this week, and I just continue to be so moved by this defense that settled down and helped put this game away against the Titans that were, keeping it close and giving them fits for the first half mostly. Titans did have the lead at halftime. And the Rams settled down and said, enough of that. We're the better team. They took care of business. So like I said, they're essentially keeping their spot, but the Detroit Lions are taking their spot back. Full panic coming out of week 1. I think this week was a, kind of perfect week for Detroit. Number 1 in the sense that, like, okay, we now know, like, Green Bay and that defense, like, that's a real thing. Like, there's nothing embarrassing about coming out week 1 and struggling against that Packers defense, especially having had to be the first team that saw it. But then week 2 to bounce back and put up a 50 burger on the Bears really looked good both sides of the ball. But it was an offensive day that felt like a Ben Johnson day. I thought they had that perfect balance of just killing you with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff and Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, and all of that. But also mixing in some fun stuff too, right? You get the occasional jet sweep and lining Amon-Ra up in the backfield and getting some of those creative twists as well. So kind of a deep breath for the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to be just fine. Absolutely Super Bowl contenders. They're not in that top tier quite yet. I think defensively, they got to get some guys back healthy. Ali McNeil especially. Still want to see them, down the road here, find a better defense with a better pass rush that Detroit can prove that they can still, score against some of those tougher pass rushes, which I don't really consider that to be the Bears' defensive line, because I do still have some questions about the interior of the Lions' offensive line, but definitely as good of a week as you could have asked for Detroit in a just dominant blowout victory. But now we are going to jump up to my final top tier here, our Super Bowl frontrunners tier. And if you look at the gambling odds, all these teams are like plus 700, more or less. Vegas views these 4 teams very, very tightly knit. And I think you can play around with the order of these top 4 teams. I really do. I have Green Bay here at number 4, but I think you can make a very strong argument that Green Bay has been the best team in the NFL this season. Really 2 dominant, convincing victories over a pair of top 10 teams here in Washington and Detroit. Obviously, the defense and what they're doing is sensational. It's not just the Micah Parsons factor. It's the fact that guys like Lucas Van Ness and Devonta Wyatt and Rashawn Gary, all the way down to like a guy like Colby Wooden looks good all of a sudden. Like they are hitting all green lights with that defensive line. But like Jordan Love looks, I don't want to say damn good, but really good. But as long as he's at that level with LaFleur scheming up things the way he is, the way that this team continues to pass protect, they're awesome on that side of the ball. Like I think we're looking at a top 2 defense and a top 7 to 8 offense, at least. Can absolutely make a case for that as the best team in the league today. But I have them keeping the number 4 spot, but jumping up into this tier with that convincing win over Washington. And then I've got the Bills at number 3. Dominant effort against the Jets. This offense, I can't say it's fun to watch because it is honestly like boring at times just seeing Josh Allen just nickel and dime defenses. But my God, is it effective. He is seeing the field so well right now, using his legs when he needs to, pushing the ball downfield when it's appropriate. But just a dominant day of offense. And yeah, defensively, they did a good job to buckle down their run defense that looked awful week 1 against the Ravens. Good to see some answers there against a Jets run game that I still think is pretty good. I think it was really more about the Bills being committed to loading up the box and finding some better answers against the run this week. So the Bills look great. The Ravens look great this week against the Browns. Not a huge surprise there. Defensively, they absolutely took care of business there, as you kind of expected, but fun to see them offensively find solutions as the game went on against a Browns defense that I do think is pretty good, and they sold out to stop the run against Derrick Henry. So the Ravens in this passing game said, hey, we got DeAndre Hopkins, we got Tylan Wallace has earned some good targets in this offense. He looks good. Just showing yet again that they can beat you in so many different ways. This is what makes the Ravens so scary. Is the fact that Lamar and this passing game and Todd Monken have evolved to a status where if you take one thing away, if you're going to sell out to stop Derrick Henry, no problem. We'll spread the ball around and beat you that way. But then I do have the Eagles at number 1, and I don't feel great about it. I think you can make a strong argument that these last 3 teams have looked better than Philadelphia. But how much of that is just an aesthetic thing? Like, look, the Eagles don't have the flashiness that a lot of these other teams have right now. I don't think Jalen Hurts is like playing dynamic or even particularly well for the quarterback position, but he's playing well for what the Eagles need him to do right now, which is exactly what he did last year, right? Like, I, as much as anyone, love sharing the passing chart and making fun of the fact that Hurts is able to win completing one pass more than 5 yards in Arrowhead. And that one pass was just, they faced a zero blitz and he just lobbed it out there for Devonta Smith to either go make a catch or draw the defensive pass interference. But at the end of the day, this defense is still a complete, wall to try and score points on. No matter who you are, they are so complete at all 3 levels. And even if they don't have a dynamic passing game, you gotta prove that you can stop this run game. And that is just easier said than done. They have the perfect collection of running back, offensive line, and a quarterback adding a numbers advantage in the run game. So even if more Eagles games are going to finish within a touchdown, this team knows how to close games as good as anybody. Tush push is a huge part of that, obviously. But having this defense too, being able to play at that level. So I think you can make an argument that the Eagles aren't the best team in the league currently, but I'm going to keep them at number 1, at least until they lose a game. Maybe that happens this week against the Rams. Maybe it doesn't, though. So that is going to do it for this week's Power Rankings. This is just snapshot analysis for all of these teams, though, you guys. So if you want even more of a deep dive into these game breakdowns, make sure you are tuned in for the Fully Inflated Football podcast, whether that means you're subscribed on this channel, ready for that episode here tomorrow, or on your audio feeds, wherever you get it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, what you think of the rankings this week. You think I got anybody too high, too low? But it was a great week of football. This was a fun episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys very soon. Peace out.